Congressman, how do you assure your constituents that this U.S. government is giving the proper support to Israel so when these incidents happen, they don't feel left alone without the #1 ally?
Well, look, there is a lot of anxiety about whether or not our government is supportive enough of Israel. That's part of why we're here today. I'm sure I'm going to get an earful about that exact issue. And some of it is legitimate, some of it might not be, and I might disagree with. Well, one of the reasons I'm here to say is at least one congressman, at least I get it, and I got to tell you something. The last time we did a roll call to see who supports Israel in their fight against terror, something like 415 out of 435 members supported Israel. I'm sure that's going to continue to be the case. A little bit late for those of you who are disconcerted by the cameras. I was assured they're going to take a little bit of B-roll and then we'll have a chance to have a discussion. I want to thank a couple of people. First, for Rabbi Schwartz for having us here. This is not only a place of Torah learning, not only a place where we express our values to the next generation, but it's a center of our civic community, and I want to thank the Rabbi for having us here. And I also want to thank Rabbi Schoenfeld, the former head of the Vaharabbonim of Queens, but more importantly, perhaps, one of the singular political voices of our community. I want to make a few remarks. This turned out, as you know, to be a propitious moment that we're meeting. But frankly, this meeting was scheduled even before what happened off the coast of Gaza. Let me say in brief form what I just said downstairs to members of the media and what I said to Secretary Clinton this morning, and what I've said to about 24 of my colleagues to whom I spoke today. What happened shortly after midnight on Sunday was the result of the instigation by the nation of Turkey, an organized effort to break a blockade that has been recognized internationally, maybe not accepted, but recognized. It was something that took place despite the warnings for going on 10 days by Israel, despite offers that were made repeatedly by the state of Israel that if you're truly interested in the humanitarian needs of the people of Gaza, we will give you a location to offload your boat, we will inspect the goods, and then we will personally escort it over the line into Gaza. What happened was another successful effort, and I say successful, another successful effort by those that don't support Israel's right to exist, by those that support the terrorist government of Gaza, by those in the international community whose first default position is always to be critical of Israel. Those are the same exact people whose default position is to be critical of the United States. This was not what is being said in international capitals it was. This was not an aggressive act by Israel. This was a defensive act by Israel. It was not a perfectly executed and planned mission, because whenever you have an attack on your shores, it is always a complicated and difficult thing to pursue. And this is an extension of something that we've been seeing for some time. We know in this community that after the Second Intifada, the supporters of the opponents of Israel made an intellectual decision that, to their credit, they've executed perfectly. They said it's clear after years of failed military efforts, it's clear that we cannot ever have our way through force, so we are going to try to use public relations, we're going to try to use the evening news, we're going to try to use Al Jazeera, the BBC, the New York Times, to try to do our job for us by illegitimizing Israel and by trying to make their very defense an international crime. This was a particularly successful effort in that regard. And that does not mean that even for a moment there should be any space between the United States and Israel. You need allies as a nation, not when things are going well. You don't need allies as a nation when it's, time for the Olympic Games. You need allies at moments like this. And that's the point that I made to the Secretary, and it's going to even more loudly going to have to be made at the United Nations. And some people have said, but was the reaction proportionate to what was happening? Well, I want to tell you that when you have an international, when you're trying to stop a boat from bordering your shores, it's not like there is a giant 10-mile boat that you bring out to go into its way. There are limited numbers of options that a Navy has in trying to effectuate stopping a boat like that. And there is no reason on earth, that a peaceful humanitarian boat should set upon the military of the country you are visiting with sticks, bars, chairs, guns, knives, and all-out violence. It is simply indefensible. And that's exactly what happened. Now, if we can just step briefly back before I open the floor up. I called this meeting because, frankly, there have been legitimate concerns raised about whether or not there has been space that has grown between the Obama administration and the Netanyahu administration. And the concern is, to paraphrase it, that, you know, it's not so much that two nations disagree from time to time. Policy's different even among friends. The question is, do Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south, and Iran in the base in the neighborhood, would they see these disagreements as an opening to try to take steps they might not have taken before? Is the rhetoric of the disagreement gotten so hot that maybe Ahmadinejad or maybe Nasrallah says, you know what, this might be a good time to test that allegiance, and we wind up having more violence because of it? We recently had a meeting, about 40 Jewish members of the House and the Senate had a meeting with the President of the United States where we basically expressed this. And I think, to his credit, he stipulated that he said that mistakes had been made. And I believe that many of the statements made by the Obama administration after the unfortunate misunderstanding that took place when Biden was there, and that's what it was. Sure that Prime Minister Netanyahu said very clearly he wished that announcement hadn't been made, but certainly it was worthy of a shake of the head, a tisking of the fingers, and that was it. Not 5 separate members of our government making statements that amounted to flogging of someone for something that really they didn't do. The President conceded, to his credit, that there were missteps there. And I think that on the other side of the coin, in terms of the military and intelligence cooperation with the Obama administration and Bibi's administration is higher than it was even under Bush. All told, the mother of all issues, putting aside the last 24 hours, is Iran. And if the United Nations is unable or too feckless to take strong action against Iran, particularly in light of the report that came out yesterday that's largely been buried by today's news, then I don't know why the United Nations exists. One thing I can tell you is what it has become, let's face it, what it has been in the entire history of the Israel has been basically an echo chamber on the east side for the most virulent anti-Israel positions, policies, and statements. If it is just going to be that, who needs it? And all the time you would hear, if only Israel, would anyone mind terribly if I took my jacket off? Is that okay? And Israel was told constantly by the international community, you must leave the occupation of Gaza. Well, the moment they did, immediately inflowed international terrorists, immediately inflowed weapons, immediately inflowed people who supported the destruction of Israel.
The blockade is not only Israel, but it's Egypt as well. Second thing, when you see the video of the soldiers coming down from the helicopter, their guns, paintball guns, are on their shoulders, both hands are on the rope. One would be suicidal knowing that they were going to be attacked to come down that way. So obviously it was not an offense, but a defense of protecting the border.
Well, it's also, both are excellent points, but let me point out something. Not that it matters. It's a violation of the Geneva Convention to shoot someone when they're coming down in a parachute or coming down in a rope. It's just, you know, they clearly were still, and this is what's great about Israel. Even in the midst of all of this, knowing full well that they're getting onto a boat where people were chanting death to Israel, death to the United States, and other chants like that, they still took a procedure that led them to have more casualties. If there's one defining thing that makes Israel even different from the United States, they pursue warfare in a way that maximizes their own injuries as a way of avoiding a harm to civilians.